As a man, you need to be a problem solver. It's something that you need to be capable of, taking curveballs as they come at you and not just wilting under pressure and becoming a non-productive slug whenever you're faced with any sort of adversity.
Yeah, because life is suffering. Life itself is suffering.
It's inevitable. Like, the people you love are going to die. Bad things are just going to happen to you. You need to be able to deal with that.
Like, how are you supposed to learn from someone who's great if you aren't modest around them?
In order to become a master, you have to be willing to become a fool.
The fool precedes the master.
I like it. It's just a nice ending.
It's a nice.
We
don't get many of those in the Old Testament.
You don't get that many of those in the Old Testament. I was pleasantly surprised.
Recording there, yes. Recording there, yes. Recording there, yes.
Yeah, we got to double check everything every time.
Yep. Proto. That's pro. You didn't follow Proto, buddy.
Oh, fuck. That's why we've had every single technical difficulty that we've ever had. It was because we didn't follow Proto.
Ta-ta there, retard. Fed smoker, man.
Anywho, we're reading the story of Isaac and Rebekah this evening. Well, you're going to be listening in the morning if you're waiting for the upload, which I don't think any of you are. But let us begin. Wish I had a fun Japanese response for that. So anyway, Isaac and Rebekah. We're not going to read through this entire thing. I do have some quotes that are particularly important, but we're going to abridge it because it's like 60 verses, very long. Anywho, okay, so Abraham makes an oath with his senior servant that the servant is to find Isaac a wife. He implicitly tells him he must not find him a wife among the filthy Canaanites, among which he is currently living, but that he has to go back to Abraham's homeland, which is, I think, Haran, to find Isaac a wife. I thought this bit was interesting. Abraham makes his servant put his hand under his thigh to swear the oath. Don't know why.
Circumcision stuff.
Yeah, right. Who knows? I didn't delve too much into the meaning of that yet. We'll probably come back to this and do it. Anyway, the servant asks what he should do if the woman refuses to come back with him. Should he bring Isaac with him to his homeland? And it's strange that they're suddenly taking the opinions of the women into account, but okay. Abraham is very adamant that the servant is not to bring Isaac to his homeland under any circumstances. God will send an angel ahead of the servant to smooth things over. The servant will be released from the oath if the woman refuses to come back with him. So he is so adamant that Isaac cannot go back to the homeland that he is just like, you don't even have to do it anymore if she won't come back with you. Fuck it. He cannot go back, which touch on that later. The servant places his hand under Abraham's thigh, swears the oath, and heads off to find Isaac, very specifically non-Canaanite. He brings 10 camels loaded up with, quote, all kinds of good things from his master. Then he set out for Aram Naharaim and made his way to the town of Nahor. He stopped for the day near the well outside of the town. Quote, it was toward evening, the time the women go out to draw water. Now, this is where it starts to get kind of funny. He prays to God, saying, Lord God, my master Abraham, exact quotes, make me successful today and show kindness to my master Abraham. See, I am standing beside the spring, and the daughters of the townspeople are coming out to draw water. May it be that when I say to a young woman, please let down your jar that I may have a drink, and she says, drink, and I'll water your camels too, let her be the one you have chosen for your servant Isaac. By this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master. Asking for a very specific sign. I mean, I know we look for signs and shit, but it's like, hey, can you just like make this literally exact and very specific thing happen? And before he could even finish fucking praying, God does it. Like literally the first person that comes, they don't mention a single wrong choice coming into play at any point. It just goes straight for, literally, it says before he can finish praying, Rebekah pops out. with, a jar ready to fill up water. But the book describes Rebekah as very beautiful and makes it a point to not only mention that she was a virgin, but also that no man had ever slept with her. I appreciate that clarification from Genesis on what a virgin is.
So it distinguishes the two when they're in this?
It says both. She is very beautiful, and here, I'll pull up the exact quote for that one. So, 18, before he had... Yeah, okay. The woman was very beautiful, a virgin. No man had ever slept with her.
Okay.
Very important.
I wonder if those are two different things in the Bible.
Being a virgin and never having slept with someone.
Yeah.
Could be. I'll have to look into that more. I didn't even think of that. I thought it was just a weird,
This is what a virgin
elaboration. Yeah. I don't know. But the servant asks Rebekah for the secret passcode that he gave to God, and she passes with flying colors, giving water not only to the servant, but all of his camels as well, of course. So he then pulls out some gold jewelry as a gift and asks the woman who she is and if her family has room in their home for him and his people and camels to stay the night. She tells him she's, quote, the daughter of Bethuel, the son that Milcah bore to Nahor. So Milcah was the wife of Abraham's brother. So Abraham is Rebekah's great uncle. They're related.
Okay.
Why do they keep having to be related?
I know, it's really strange.
I don't know if there's some significance to that. I haven't been able to think of any yet, but anyway, Isaac is maybe her second cousin, Rebekah. I don't know. But yeah, the incest is a recurring theme. But anyway, they say that they have room for him and all of his camels. And the servant also places the ring in her nose and places the bracelets on her wrists. I don't know if that's particularly important, but it is funny thinking about him actually reaching his fingers into this woman's nose to put in a nose ring. One of the pieces of jewelry is specifically a nose ring. Some jewelry. The servant prays to God and thanks him for remaining faithful to Abraham as well as for leading him on a successful journey. Rebekah runs to tell her family about what happened. Her brother Laban, seemingly impressed by the gold jewelry, runs out to Abraham's servant and says, quote, "Come, you who are blessed by the Lord, why are you standing out here? I have prepared the house and a place for the camels," unquote. The servant goes to the house, the camels are unloaded, straw is brought for them, and water was brought for the servant and his men to wash their feet. Then food was set before him, but he said, quote, "I will not eat until I have told you what I have to say." "Then tell us," Laban said. Direct quote. The servant then introduces himself, gives the family an abridged history of Abraham, as well as a brief rundown of his current station in life, basically. He tells him that God has made him rich in gold and silver, livestock, and that he has not only male but female servants as well. He specifically says, and he has male and female servants. Okay.
The details in the Old Testament are so interesting.
Yeah, I feel like there might be something to every one, but then you come across one like that, and it's just I don't know what's the difference.
Yeah.
But so he then proceeds to literally tell the family exactly everything that I just read. It damn near verbatim. Verses 34 through 48 are literally just a somewhat abridged retelling of verses 1 through 27. Okay. It's absurd. It's 5 paragraphs of filler that could have been replaced with a single sentence.
Right.
He then told them everything that happened and why he was there.
Yeah.
So that was weird. Then let's see. The only new information added was that he placed the jewelry on Rebekah. He didn't that wasn't initially said in verses 1 through 27. But anyway,
Okay.
he also says that when he prayed earlier, he praised the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who had led me on the right road to get the granddaughter of my master's brother for his son. He specifically mentions and thanks the Lord for the fact that he was led to blood relatives. Like, why? Why is that so important? That makes me think there's something to the incest thing.
I think so. I have a kind of a thought on that.
Okay.
That we can get to.
Cool. Let's see. Then he says, quote, "Now if you will show kindness and faithfulness to my master, tell me. And if not, tell me so I may know which way to turn." So just very straightforward. He's just like, all right, yes or no, so I can leave. Laban and Bethuel answered, quote, "This is from the Lord. We can say nothing to you one way or the other. Here is Rebekah. Take her and go and let her become the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has directed." So they are acknowledging the importance of just the call of that higher you. Then the servant brought out gold and silver jewelry and articles of clothing for Rebekah. He also gave, quote, "costly gifts to her brother and her mother." Then he and the men who were with him ate and drank and spent the night there. When they got up the next morning, the servant said, "Send me on my way to my master." To which Laban and Bethuel replied, "Let the young woman remain with us 10 days or so, then you may go." Direct quote. The servant said to them, quote, "Do not detain me, now that the Lord has granted success to my journey. Send me on my way so I may go to my master." Then Rebekah's mother and brother say, "Let's call the young woman and ask her about it." So they called Rebekah and asked, "Will you go with this man?" "I will go," says Rebekah. So they sent their sister Rebekah, sister and daughter, on her way, along with her nurse and Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, quote, "Our sister, may you increase to thousands upon thousands. May your offspring possess the cities of their enemies." And I have a few thoughts on that.
Sure.
We'll get to later. Then Rebekah and her attendants get ready and went back with the servant to Abraham. Isaac had just returned home from Beer Lahai Roy. He had been living in the Negev, which is a desert in southern Israel. And the meaning of the location that he was at is something I also want to get into because it's very interesting to me.
Prime.
Sponsored by Prime Energy.
Jury.
Back to jury. So as a result of the jury, ultimately, when it comes down to it, that's what impressed everybody so much.
God, that's so strange.
Rebekah's on the way. I mean, there was more to it than that, but that was like a big selling point.
Well, it's strange that then they later on when Moses is out in the desert and they decide he's up in the mountains and he doesn't come back for a while, and then they make a false idol out of gold, and so why is it valuable here and acceptable to be valuable here, but then later on it's not acceptable to be valuable in other?
Well, I wonder how significant the fact that false idol made of gold was gold is. I think it's just more, the problem was more that they were worshiping a false idol regardless of what it was made of. I mean, I think it just makes sense that it would be something valuable that they are worshiping, so maybe it's just about not putting too much value in it.
We'll figure it out.
I mean, everybody likes a bit of gold. I mean, that's just reasonable. I don't know. But the Bible is mentioning it, so it's probably more relevant than just being reasonable.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Isaac had been living off in the southern desert. He had come home. He went out into the field one evening to meditate, and as he looked up, he saw camels approaching. Rebekah also looked up and saw Isaac. She got down from her camel and asked the servant, "Who is that man in the field coming to meet us?" "He is my master," the servant answered. Rebekah took her veil and covered herself in response. Exact phrasing.
Whose master was that?
The servant who went to get Rebekah.
Okay, and then...
So Isaac is also his master. He's a servant to the family,
Okay,
I would imagine.
Okay.
She covered herself, yeah, and I made a note about that
Yeah.
just the importance of modesty among greatness or whatever. We'll get to it.
Yeah.
But here's my favorite fucking bit. Exact phrasing in the Bible. Then the servant told Isaac all he had done. Why didn't you fucking do that 30 verses ago when you spent 30 verses literally just
Right.
rewriting the first 30 verses?
Right.
Like, what the hell? I didn't read through the whole thing and then make the note saying, why didn't they just use one sentence? I made that note, and then 30 minutes later, I finished the fucking thing, and I'm like, they did that!
Yeah.
Like, how is it less tacky to repeat 30 fucking verses
Yeah.
versus one?
Right.
Like, fuck. Anyway. Isaac brought Rebekah into his mother's tent and married her. Quote, she became his wife, and he loved her, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. And that is the end of the story. So, very quick abridgment through the entire thing. Abraham sends his servant off to the homeland to find Isaac a wife. The servant finds him a suitable wife by offering her jewelry and explaining Abraham's great station in life. So greatness is important. Anyway, finds her. She is sent off with her family's blessing. They get back. She sees Isaac. They get married, and Isaac is comforted by her. There's the story.
I'm going to have a tough time with this story.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have some.
Yeah.
I have some. Well, what do you have? Any takeaways from any point in particular?
I guess I'll speak on the incest because it's like such a reoccurring theme.
Yeah, you said you had something on that.
It's a stretch, but
whatever we might come to is progress here.
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
Yeah. I think I've maybe mentioned it to you, but like the dream that I have is to become so wealthy that I can buy a piece of land and without even worrying about it, build houses for all of the people all my family, all of my, people that are in a community. They don't have to be, friends, etc. The people that I like, that we all share the same values and the same beliefs. Mm. The only thing that I can think of right now that I could use to extrapolate on the whole incest thing is like, I want the people, my friends, and their families, like, to be marrying my family, essentially. Like, all of us that are in the same community, in the same tribe, I want them all to be coming together because then I know, okay, if this person marries my sister, let's say, we're all on the same page. We all have the same values. Like, that's important to me. And so, because they're a part of my tribe, and my family is obviously part of my tribe, I know
intermingling that tribe is going to be beneficial.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, so it's like they're just taking a much more direct approach where they're going straight to just marrying within their bloodline.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, this is before the time of Jesus, so this is maybe more like 5,000 years ago, 4 to 5,000 years ago. I mean, that long ago, it might have been hard to assemble a tribe that was more than just blood kin. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not a historian, but I mean, I would imagine it certainly was much harder than it would be today. So we can say that definitely.
Definitely. It's strange. Like, I'd have to maybe research it, I suppose, but like, I don't think there's any signs of incest within chimpanzees.
I'm not sure, but it wouldn't surprise me if it happened from time to time, but I'm sure it's not prominent.
Right.
Because it would, long term, that causes genetic issue.
Right.
And they're extremely intelligent and capable. It commonly, like, that's the rule, not the exception.
Yeah.
So I would imagine it's not prominent, at least in most ape ones like chimpanzees and gorillas that are notably intelligent. Which I think most primates are, but I'm just, I don't want to be too broad with it because for all I know, there are some really goddamn stupid species of monkeys.
Sure.
But there are several that are definitely extremely intelligent. I mean, some I don't know, zoologists, or I don't know what classification they would be, but some people believe that chimps are starting to enter into their own stone age.
Oh,
they
yeah.
definitely use tools. I mean, like they'll use sticks to dig into logs to get bugs out, and I think they'll use rocks to like bang on trees to scare owls and birds out, or
That's interesting.
maybe lizards. I can't remember the exact name, but to scare animals
Sure.
out of hiding spots in trees. So they're using like hammer-like tools and snake-like tools.
Yeah, and I'm curious, like how long it probably wouldn't have taken that long once we became like conscious beings to realize that incestuous relationships create genetic defects in their children. Like I would imagine that was noticeable 2,000, 4,000 years ago. Maybe not.
I mean, you've brought up the point before that we're just by default pattern recognizers,
Right.
and that is likely apparent in our ancestors as well, and we evolved from apes, so it's reasonable to believe that they would also be pattern recognizers. So I'm sure that if they tried it out at some point, they would have realized, oh, okay, all of the ones that have been doing that long term have fucked up non-productive members of our troop. The ones not doing that seem to be having normal babies. That seems noticeable enough to me within a primate species. Within most animal species, I feel like, well, maybe not. Yeah, no, scratch that. But primate species and like dolphins and intelligent animals, absolutely. Farm cats will inbreed for generations and
Farm cats will?
never fucking stop. Oh yeah, yeah. Grandma said that was a big problem. She's from a farm town.
Yeah.
But yeah, she had to like make sure that didn't happen with the cats, the neighborhood cats that she fed and took care of.
Right.
But anyway, incest tangent aside, you might be onto something there, because it might have been the only option, but still, it seems like there has to be more to it. Maybe, I don't know. That's why we're doing the show.
It's right.
We don't have the answers. Maybe you guys can come up with some.
Yeah. It again, like it goes back to like the way that people interpret the Bible. They're selectively interpreting it. Like if you're going to interpret for those that interpret it literally, like how do you look past that? Like, you know what I mean? It's just, there's an explanation for that. God wanted it or something like that. Like, no, like let's think deeper here.
Level.
Yeah, like that's the point of the show.
Yeah, and I need a good explanation for why incest is so goddamn prominent.
Right.
Especially because I think at a certain isn't like not one of the commandments, but in Leviticus at some point they say something about it being bad to lie with your sister or something specifically. I could be wrong about that.
Well,
but
yeah.
I think if I
looking forward to getting to that.
Yeah, and I'll look it up and pop the verse up on the screen now if I find it. But anything else that you've got?
The covering the eyes when the master enters is interesting. But what do you have? Let's go over what you've got.
Yeah, I'll go earlier back than that. I'll just take the notes I took from the top. So Abraham being very adamant that like Isaac is not to go back to the homeland, because like God said that he would bless them with these lands that he adventures out into. That was the whole point of him needing to leave the homeland, go away. But so he's very adamant that he does not return, which I think is just a point on not going back to your past if you are actively making progress. And that's what you're supposed to be doing. Your conscience is telling you, like, go out into the world, explore, adventure, make something of yourself. Don't look back. I think that's what that is implying when Abraham is literally like, if she won't come back with you, do not bring him back. You're freed of this oath.
Okay. Sorry, I'm struggling to have some takeaways here today.
No, that's okay. I was the exact same way with the last story. I mean, not so much. It was just a short story.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and it seemed like, I don't know. I don't know. So let's see. He prays to God, the servant, whenever he gets to the homeland. He prays to God and asks for that very specific, like, sign, whatever. Whenever I ask a woman if I can have some water, if she says yes, and let me also give some to your camels, then that's the one. I think I think that's just kind of referring to relying on that kind of gut feeling you get sometimes, like when you just know this is right or this is wrong. You know, the sign that you get is not going to be that specific.
Yeah, right.
But, you know, I'm sure at some point you can, maybe you don't have a specific memory, but I'm sure at some point you've been like, just get some sort of sign here. Like, what do I do? Even if just about something small. But that's a thing that people do, it seems.
So just to clarify, so she got Isaac water. Rebekah got Isaac water.
The servant.
The servant.
Yeah, the servant is the one who goes to get Rebekah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is when the servant first gets to the homeland, back to the city that Abraham told him not to bring Isaac back to. This is when he first gets back to that city where he is looking for the wife, because it can't be a Canaanite.
Right.
No. But he prays to God, asks for this very specific sign that this is the right woman, and then she comes out and the servant asks her for water, and she gives water to the servant and then offers water to the camels, which was the sign.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's a lot. It's a long fucking story. It took me a while to go through it last night.
Yeah.
I set aside an hour and it ended up being like 2. It was just like, Jesus Christ. But you want to reset these?
Yeah.
Okay. It very specifically mentions that she is a virgin, which again is a recurring theme. Like, virgins are desirable, which I think is just signifying the importance of preserving yourself as the sexual gatekeeper.
Yeah.
I mean, straightforward with that one. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So when Rebekah's sent on her way by her family and they bless her, they say, "Our sister, may you increase to thousands upon thousands. May your offspring possess the cities of their enemies." First thing, this is just a quick one. The ability to conquer your enemies and like take their land is also prominent.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. But she is still being presented as something that can be given away. So that kind of, at first that was kind of making me think that, like, why is her own call from God not being mentioned or kind of taken into account here? You know, they're just relying on the servant or Abraham's call from the Lord. Whatever, you know, whenever they say we don't have a say here, this is what the Lord wants.
Right.
Like, it hasn't mentioned their having any reflection on this or being spoken to by God. It doesn't say anything about Rebekah speaking to God. But, you know, I don't know if she has they ask if they can stay for 10 days. And then the servant's like, "No, let us go now." And then they call Rebekah to see what she wants to do. I don't know if she has the ability to say, "I don't want to go at all." You know what I mean?
Right.
She definitely has the ability to say, "Let me stay 10 days." But I don't know if she has the option to be like, no, period.
Right.
So I think that something you can take away from that is that ultimately maybe the authors wanted us to just assume that was naturally a woman's calling. You know, the same way that, I mean, 2,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, wherever we're at in the timeline here, it was extremely important to have offspring if you could do so. Like, life was hard. You needed as many people tending to the fields and being able to defend the tribe as possible.
Right.
So it might just be naturally assumed that that is God's calling for a woman, to find a suitable man who has followed his calling from God to go become capable and suitable. She needs to go find this suitable partner. That is her calling, so that she can have a child, provide for the child, help the man so that the man can help her and create this unity. That's kind of what I'm getting away from the repeated treating of women as like property, almost like they're just, you can just go find a wife, or you can just give your daughter away as a wife. I think that's more just related to the idea that back then, maybe that was the assumed role.
I think even now, in general, a woman's call is still to have children and to raise the family. Like, I still think that's the case. And to a certain extent, it's the man's case as well, for that to be his call to raise a family, but for the man to be out doing something in general. I still think that's the case to some extent. Well, a woman's natural call is to childbirth and to raising families.
Sure. And I would say that the relation of the man's duty to that is that in becoming capable, generally speaking, he is capable of taking care of this family, and that's his responsibility.
Right.
Like, the mother is generally going to be the more nurturing parent. So it'd be nice if you could have the mother caring for the child while the man is providing for both of you, all three of you, because you are now this beautiful collective. Like, that's ultimately, I think, the purpose of the man going out to better himself, so that he can also take his part in this family role.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking of this maybe even yesterday, and I'm not saying at all that it's absolutely right. Just a thought that I've had. I'm curious what you think. That, like, in order for a man to become a good man, he must suffer and he must go through adversity. But in order for a woman to become a good woman, she doesn't necessarily have to suffer and go through adversity. A woman can can be a good woman without having to go through those things. Whereas a man, I think it's necessary for that.
I think it's certainly less necessary for, like, I don't think that women have to suffer to the same degree, generally speaking, as men do in order to develop, the same way that men need to experience that hardship, because everybody needs to be capable of dealing with adversity to some extent. But as a man, you need to be a problem solver. Like, that is, it's something that you need to be capable of, like taking curveballs as they come at you and not just wilting under pressure and becoming a non-productive slug whenever you're faced with any sort of adversity. Like, you need to be capable of continuing your operation that it takes for you to be able to provide. And that if we're assuming that it's more, I won't even say I'm assuming. I would say that it is my opinion, and people are free to disagree with it, that it is important for a woman to be a good nurturer for the child. And I think that the best scenario for that is her being the primary caretaker for a long period of time. And so the man needs to be able to make that as easy for her as possible by handling life's random bullshit that it throws at you, so that she can take care of this child that is still learning to be able to do this. You know, like, the child doesn't need stress. And I would say ideally the woman gets as little stress as possible, because I think that it is, like you said, more important for men to just experience that suffering so that they can be capable of, like, taking the brunt of that for them, you know, fighting that shit off so that your wife and your child don't have to. And a big part of that is just general providing,
Yeah.
as far like financial support and just being able to support a household and all that good stuff.
I think everyone should go through that, but my question is, does a woman need to go through that in order to be a good woman, or can she be a good woman without going through that?
Okay, I see what you're saying. It's like, is that capability of dealing with harsh adversity as required to be a good woman as
Right.
it is to be a good man?
Right.
I would say that kind of the same, almost kind of non-answer. I feel like it's definitely less important, because let's say something happens that you have no control over, like it just happens to your wife, the mother of your child. It just happens to her. You have no control over it. If she has zero capability of dealing with adversity, then she's going to turn into a fucking lunatic, just like you would if you had no capability of dealing with adversity. First little fucking wrench in the machinery comes along, you absolutely fall apart. That's not good for anybody. It's not good for her, not good for anybody around her. So I think it is still necessary, but to a lesser degree, because I think that the man is supposed to balance that out and take on the brunt of that. But I do think it is required to just be a good person to be able to deal with some sort of adversity. But again, I think that they need to go through less of it and maybe less severe versions of it.
Yeah, because life is suffering. Life itself is suffering.
Yeah, it's inevitable. Like, the people you love are going to die unexpectedly sometimes. You're not going to have any time to prepare for it. Like, bad things are just going to happen to you. You need to be able to deal with that, and I think that for everybody, it's important to be able to deal with that, grief, that ultimately that's it. Grief, grief that's brought on by whatever it may be. You need to be able to deal with that, whoever you are, man, woman, even children to a certain degree, not until a certain age. You don't need to be traumatizing your toddler, but if your kindergartner is dealing with a shitty kid on the playground, like, don't immediately intervene. Let him start to learn how to deal with that type of shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's important for everybody to have some capability to just deal with problems, I think.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay, so Isaac returning home from Bir Lahai Roy. I'm sure that's not how you actually pronounce it, but that's where he was.
Who the fuck knows?
Yeah, so in Hebrew, that roughly translates to the well of him that liveth and seeth me, or the well of the vision of life. And this is also specifically the well that God met with Hagar to save her and Ishmael's lives. So super interesting that he was off to, because remember, last story was the death of his mother. So he's in grieving right now. Isaac is grief-stricken over the loss of his mother, and he has gone to the well of the vision of life, which is also a well where his blood relative's life was saved. So it's a well of vision and a well of salvation, both. So, and then it mentions that he was in the in Negev. So that translates to dry or wipe dry in Hebrew, like to dry, the verb, or to wipe dry in Hebrew. So I'm thinking like drying his tears, maybe, because again, just he is in grief right now. Maybe that's the significance of that being what the name of the desert he's in.
That's interesting. Yeah.
But anyway, so if we're assuming that he went to a well of salvation and future sight to dry his tears and figure out a way to alleviate his grief.
It's interesting that you would go to a well to do that.
Yeah, well, it makes sense I'll just say it makes sense that you would go to a well for salvation, but why would you, what do you mean?
Why would you go to a well to dry to dry?
Oh, to wipe dry. Yeah. Well, yeah. And the well, the different translations make me think we can kind of separate the different symbolisms there.
Yeah.
Because it's the well isn't named like to dry. That's just the name of the whole region that he was in. So I'm thinking separate interpretations here, but good point though. But loved that. Then he goes out into the field to meditate when he meets Rebekah for the first, or sees and meets her for the first time. So meditation is mentioned here, and I think that this building of shrines, this ritual that isn't specifically mentioned here, but that's been a recurring theme that we've like wondered about in the past. Like every time Abraham would get somewhere and do something, he would then build a shrine to God. Maybe that is almost like a ritual kind of symbolic of meditation.
Yeah.
You know, like you are doing this ritual over and over again, building a shrine to God, just acknowledging your higher self.
So every time we think about it, like every time we meditate, let's say, we are building a shrine to God. That's an interesting.
In a way, yeah. If you're using that meditation to try and kind of convene with your higher self, especially.
I like that a lot. That's super interesting.
Cool.
That's and in other ways, like reminding you where you came from, maybe too, you know, in a certain sense, like the shrine, everywhere you go where you're in new land, build a shrine. Remember your roots. Leave
your mark. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. But so that being said, I think that it's cool that the first time Isaac sees Rebekah, he's just alone and reflecting, meditating with that higher self, and then on comes this woman that he doesn't question marrying at all. It just goes from the servant explained what happened, and now they're getting married. He did not make any fuss, and I think that might be somewhat related to the fact that he was just meditating, potentially convening with his God. So like that. Taking the veil and covering herself. You also had a point on that, but I just think that like reinforces the importance of modesty around greatness, around a master, quote unquote, because it's as soon as he says he is my master, she takes her veil and covers herself. So just like I think the takeaway there is just maintain your modesty in the presence of people who are worthy of respect.
How does the verse go? It's Rebekah puts a veil over herself.
Yeah, let me pull up the actual verbatim. He is my master. This is okay. So Rebekah asks, "Who is that man in the field coming to meet us?" "He is my master," the servant answered. So she took her veil and covered herself.
And the master is Isaac's...
It's Isaac.
It is Isaac.
Yeah. The servant is the one talking to him who made this oath with Abraham to go find Isaac a wife.
So she covers herself in front of her future husband.
Yeah.
He is my master. Yeah, I think I can't take anything other way than what your interpretation is, which I liked. Right now.
Cool. Yeah. I think it's just modesty is important.
Right.
Especially, we were on the topic of women being the gatekeepers, you know. So covering yourself can just kind of, again, be another reinforcement of sexual modesty. It's like, well, let me not be too revealing. I want to make a good first impression with this future husband of mine and show him some respect.
Yeah, and I guess a good takeaway to kind of dive a little bit deeper into being modest in front of greatness, whether the Bible intended it this way or not, this is a takeaway I have of that is, like, how are you supposed to learn from someone who's great if you aren't modest around them? If you believe that you know equal to them or more than them, that would also then assume that you can't learn anything from them because you have surpassed them.
In order to become a master, you have to be willing to become a fool.
Yeah, the fool precedes the master. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, yeah, be modest in front of that, and then you can learn at incredible rates.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I like that a lot. Just furthering on that as to setting aside your ego. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I like that. Let's see. So, okay. The final line, I'll just make sure that I'm reading verbatim. So last two verses, last paragraph. Then the servant told Isaac all he had done. This is directly after she covers herself with a veil. So, he is my master, the servant answered. So she took her veil and covered herself. Then the servant told Isaac all he had done. Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he married Rebekah. So she became his wife, and he loved her. And Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Okay, so that is the verbatim ending of the chapter. So
He was comforted after his mother's death because he has Rebekah.
Yeah, which I like because, again, confirmation bias. It reinforces my idea that, just like you said, it's a man's responsibility to take over some of that protective role that a father offers. It is also the wife's responsibility to take over some of that role of being a comforter and a source of peace. It's specifically mentioned. Like, I love the symbolism here. So he even brings her symbolically into his mother's tent to marry her.
Yeah.
So it is specifically alluding to the fact that she is taking over this role, or at least that this scenario has some relation to the fact that Sarah just died. But Isaac goes to a well that God used to save lives, the name of which translates the well of the vision of life in a desert that's name means to wipe dry. Like, Isaac is in grief over his mother's passing. He visited a place that represents vision, salvation, and drying tears, and it is my thought. So he's grief-stricken, so he needed to wipe his tears in Negev, needed to be saved from his grief, which is the well used to save his family member's life, and he needed guidance in this grief, which is why I think he went to the well of the vision of life. So he's like, when you're grief-stricken, it can throw you off, and you can get to that point where you're just like, what the hell do I do? So I think that this is kind of alluding to him needing that vision, that guidance, like, what do I do? And after going to this place that is like so heavily symbolic of saving someone that is currently dealing with just terrible circumstances and in need of help, he comes back, reflects, and then he meets a wife who comforts him and that he loves. It's very pretty. I like it. It's just a nice ending.
It's a nice, we don't get many of those in the Old Testament.
You don't get that many of those in the Old Testament. I was pleasantly surprised, and I loved all of the symbolism and how specific it got.
Yeah.
I enjoyed researching this one. That's probably why it took twice as long as I planned for last night. But I liked it a lot.
Like a C transition, semi-related, like the wife taking over the nurturing role in a sense for the mother when the mother passes, and I don't know. This is
even not passing, but just whenever you leave the household.
Leaving the household.
Yeah.
But like I don't know if it was a fucking pickup artist or whatever it was, but he was talking about, and it's an interesting thought.
Oh,
I think I kind of agree with it in a sense, but like
I was going to sarcastically say I love them.
It's an interesting thought. But that he talks about, like, when you are pursuing a girl, you're her brother, like playful, giving you shit, whatever, right? And then when you start dating a girl, you become the father in a sense of like an authoritative position. Not sure what that has to do with this story, but I thought it was kind of interesting.
Well, I mean, it just relates to you taking over those roles. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, so I mean, that's a fair point, and I would say I kind of agree with that. Yeah, whenever you first meet somebody, you want to be playful. Obviously, you don't want to change into a different person, but it's just, you don't want to come off as like a Ron Swanson when you first meet a fucking woman,
Right.
you know, unless you're just looking for somebody if that's just you and you're looking for somebody that just wants that, then I mean, more power to you.
Sure.
But generally speaking,
Good for you.
it's good for you. But generally, it's going to be more beneficial to just be like lighthearted and playful in the beginning. And you should obviously maintain that whenever you're in the relationship. You just need to add like you're a protector now and a provider now as well. You know, there are just more serious implications as to like what your responsibilities are at that point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But still keep that playfulness. Obviously, that's a part of who you are. Don't use it if it's not who you are naturally. I mean, first of all, you're going to be bad at it, but you also just don't want to be ingenuine.
I feel bad. I feel bad for people that can't be playful.
Yeah.
That would be tough, man.
Do you think they are? I'm sure it's some are and some aren't, but like, do they realize I am not playful and therefore that is not therefore, but that is a detriment? Like, do you think they articulate it that way?
I think some do. I've met people who are like recognize that in themselves. Definitely. I like.
Oh, well, fuck me. I've been somewhat similar to that in you know, depressive states.
Sure.
You know. But you mean just like generally speaking, like this is the way these people are.
Well, here's my thought. I think everyone is inherently playful. And like I might have said this on the podcast already, but the quote that I really like from Nietzsche is, I have said this, man's maturity is to have regained the innocence of a child at play. I think everyone is inherently playful, and we are taught through mimetic discipline that, or whatever it is, circumstances, it's taken out of us. It's like the playfulness is burned out of us almost. I think we're all inherently playful in some sense, maybe to different degrees, but still,
absolutely,
it's still in all of us. I don't know.
No, definitely. If you're socialized properly as a child, then you will naturally be playful.
Right.
I mean, I think that's why the traditional schooling system is trash, because naturally at that age you are playful and you should be playing, and obviously you need to be learning as well, but 8 hours a day of depriving children of play is depriving them of their natural
State.
instinct and need.
Yeah.
Like, they need that kind of socialization.
I think we've said this already. Sorry to cut you off.
No. I had made my point.
In a case for homeschooling, again, one of the biggest drawbacks that people say is like they aren't getting socialized. Motherfucker, that we're told to shut the fuck up at school for 8 hours a day. We get to hang out with each other for 15 minutes at recess and lunch.
Yeah, like
when are we socializing?
And not only that, but it's like going to the ACE program really opened my eyes as to how much time is wasted when you are in a classroom.
Oh, man,
I got more. So the way that I went to 3 different schools, right? Clayton, Gateway, ACE. At Clayton, you earn, I think, 6.25 credits per year. You want to reset these?
Yeah, I'm going to go to the bathroom too.
Cool.
Good time to wrap up.
Yeah.
All right.
But homeschooling, it's the school system. So Clayton, 6.25 credits per year. Gateway, 8 credits per year, which is weird. So you need 24 to graduate. So Clayton was set up so that you would have, maybe you needed 25 to graduate at Clayton. I'm not sure. But either way, 24, 25. At Gateway, it was 24. So at Clayton, it took you 4 years to get all of your credits. At Gateway, it took you 3 years to earn all of your credits. And then you had to stay a 4th year to do a major. And I wasn't interested in any of the, I mean, if you were going into like veterinary stuff, or if you were going into aviation, I mean, one of the guys that I know went to the aviation master or whatever major and ended up being a jet mechanic in the Marines. So like it had utility. I just wasn't interested in any of them. So I was like, why stick around for a 4th year if I can just have them in 3 and finish through the ACE program? And the ACE program is it's an alternative program, typically used for people that are behind on their credits to catch up and finish with a diploma instead of going for a GED. But, people say that they're looked at the same way. They're not. In my experience, at least, it seems like people hold a GED in lower regard. Anyway, just negative connotation. I don't agree with it.
Yeah.
But wanted to finish early, so I actually had, because of Clayton's fucked up credit system, I was technically 1 3/4 credits behind, and they allowed me to go for these just 2 extra because I can't do 3/4 of a class. So they let me just take 2 extra credits. They weren't supposed to, but they were like, if you can do it, then we'll let you keep doing it. But you got to keep up with it. I was able to take 2 more classes than you would typically take going to school for 3 hours a day. And straight A's.
Yeah.
Like in a more difficult curriculum than I was using at Clayton, or not Clayton. Clayton's a good school, but at Gateway, more difficult curriculum. Like the curriculum at Ace was more on par with the curriculum at Clayton.
Right.
I didn't feel like I was wasting my fucking time. But you waste so much time in school. If you're homeschooling your kids, you can teach them a day's worth of lessons in like 3 hours.
Yeah.
And then you have so much more time to go socialize them organically, not in a controlled fucking schoolyard.
Right.
Take them to the pool if it's that time of year. I mean, generally,
Right.
not much school year time that the pool is open, but take them to the playground,
Involve them in
whatever.
sports.
Get them in sports.
Yep.
Yeah, boom. Teach them to kickbox. Put them in martial arts.
Right.
Do that early. They'll be great at it. They'll build the muscle memory. But yeah, you have more time to socialize them, and the socialization is more productive.
Yep.
Freer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But any further points from you, sir?
No, sir.
All right. Well, I think that's a good way to wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I think this was a good episode.
Biblecast.
Alhamdulillah. And the Lord was laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away, yet who of his generation protested? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgressions of my people he was punished. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death. Though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit of his mouth, yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, he will see his offspring and prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. After he suffered, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death, and was numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. So basically, this man was built to suffer. He will suffer his whole life, but eventually it will be worth it.
Sounds like Job.
A little bit. Yeah, it's like kind of a cross between Job and Jesus.
They just recorded that whole thing with that.
Love that.